It takes a brave and independent mindset to go tiny. If you are trying to figure out your tiny pivot, this podcast is here to inspire and connect you with the other unconventional, gritty, inspirational people within this community. I am Laura Lynch, your tiny house friend and host. On this show, we are always going to come back to money because as a financial planner, this is the question I hear the most. How do I make this work for me financially? Well, that's my jam, so jump in, let's go. New episodes drop every Thursday. Hey friends, welcome to Less House More Moola podcast. It's Laura. I wanted to share with you just a little recap. This year, 2024, has been so monumental for me, as I'm sure you know. A lot of change in life. When I go back to this time last year, I was still in my big American dream house and really dreaming of this life that I'm now living. You all were with me throughout this journey in the last year, and it has been so great to be able to share a little bit of myself as well as the stories of so many amazing people taking chances, doing tiny living their way. There's so many different ways to do this lifestyle and so many benefits. And of course, one of the most important ones is the one that I have experienced, and that is the deep change that comes from being mortgage free. So I thought that we would, as we wrap up this year, have a little look back. I'd love to go back to a conversation that I had with Amanda Acuna, because she is one of the few folks that I've talked to who are doing tiny living with a family. And so for those of you out there who are constantly held back by the notion that you don't have enough space for family, which is really important this time of year, I thought we would have a little look there and refresh our memory of Amanda Acuna's story. So I hope you enjoy this rewind back to 2023 with Amanda Acuna. Make sure you stay tuned. Got a lot of really good news and exciting announcements coming up at the beginning of the year. So stay with me. Enjoy this little rewind. I'm going to be taking the week off myself. So let's have a little refresh as we go into this holiday week. Amanda Acuna, welcome to Less House More Moola. So thrilled that you can be here to share your tiny story, especially since you're kind of in the beginning of your journey, which I'm sure will be super helpful for listeners. It's so fun, this whole tiny living ecosystem, because I was just, reading through a Facebook group that I'm a part of and, saw some of your comments and sent you a message. And here we are. And I'm so glad because you have such a special message to share with us today. So please start us off by sharing the why behind your tiny house.
Yeah. So my husband is military. He got stationed in North Texas. We were in Charleston, South Carolina, and he got moved, and we stayed in a tiny house while our house was for sale, and we loved it. And he's like, I could live like this. And I was like, I could live like this. And then we chickened out because we're in Tornado Alley here, and it was a terrifying idea, and parking and all that. We're like, we'll just go normal. But after 2 years and 2 houses that we just did not like, they weren't great. They weren't really healthy living situations. We decided to just make the jump. It all came down to like our values and our children and spending a lot of time in nature and outside instead of like the concrete jungle that was the town that we lived in. And yeah, we both were on the same page, which I think helped a lot, and just kind of pushed through the fear and made the leap.
So amazing. So a lot of people really struggle with the parking thing. How did you find somewhere to park your tiny house?
Yeah, so that was a little bit of a challenge, mainly because I wanted like several backup options. So we met a lot of people here at the farmers market. We love to shop local for everything that we can. And back in November, I messaged like every single farm that I knew within like an hour drive of base. And most of them were like, no, or not sure. But this one, who I absolutely love anyways, was like, heck yeah, come out. That'd be awesome. That'd be so much fun. I wanted to start a little community like that. Like she was so gung ho about it. And I was like, okay, yeah. So after several months, when we knew our lease would be up, we decided like, let's do this. And so I met with her for coffee and we went over the logistics. And that was that. But I was still hesitant because I didn't have other backup options. Like our tiny house is pretty big. We couldn't park it in an RV park. Worst case scenario, something fell through. But we got their word and we'll be here for 2 years. That's the plan. So we just decided to make a leap of faith and do it because everything felt right and kind of totally aligned.
So you said you're going to be there for 2 years. Does that mean your kind of land lease with them is up, or you're planning on getting restationed somewhere?
So my husband has 2 years left in the military, and then he's planning on getting out. And we're talking about buying land somewhere, but we're just kind of leaving options open right now. But the tiny house gives us more options for that too, which is pretty cool because we have a paid for home. And we know so many farms everywhere because of the kind of people that we kind of meet and attract where we move. So that's pretty awesome. But yeah, he's got 2 years left. We don't have we don't have an official lease or anything. They're not even charging us rent to park here. We're right over by the pigs. It's a regenerative farm. We're right over by the pigs. And so every morning they just want me to go check the pig water, make sure they're full. And that's all I do. But we're here to help out with more stuff. We keep asking them if they need help with anything else because we want to learn how they do everything. But yeah, we definitely have a sweet parking situation.
Yeah, that is so cool. So then in 2 years, kind of, it's really open as to where you will end up and maybe based on next career for your husband or what have you, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So you'll have to kind of navigate the tiny parking situation again in a couple of years if you all don't stay in that area.
Yeah. And that was another thing too that was like holding us back is like, but I have a twin sister and she's very like-minded and she kind of helped me get unstuck, like when you get stuck in that like overthinking stuff. And she's like, well, you're planning everything 5 to 10 years in the future. The future isn't even real right now. We have like the present. So she's like, start thinking like 1 to 2 years instead. And that's what really helped us, or helped me. My husband was fine, but like helped me kind of jump out and be like, yeah, you know what? She's right. Like quality of life matters more, especially with kids this young. We want to give them a certain life. We want to learn so much stuff right now. So we're like, okay, we'll think 2 years. And then from there, we'll figure out what's up.
Yeah, good. So say more about that. What kind of life are you trying to give your children?
We really value nature and spending time outside. And I feel like that is so much of what kids need and are missing these days. It's like I also homeschool. My son's only 4. So for me, it's like he shouldn't be, I don't feel like he should be in school inside in 4 walls. Like he's not a 4-wall kind of kid. He's a little boy. He just wants to bounce off the walls if he's inside. But outside, they turn into totally different people and like they're centered and they're calm and they're exploring. And like he knows every single kind of bug out here. And we know how to identify snakes already. Like it's really, really cool. So our values are really to like learn and respect nature and spend more time outside. And that was the other thing too. It's like what I love about tiny living is like when we have a big house, big living areas, everyone has their own room, their own bathroom. They're like, you're so divided and kind of like closed off in this space where tiny living, it's a small space. So it's more comfortable and freeing and nice to be outside. You're kind of pushed to be outside. We're outside like 6-7 hours a day now, which is insane. And I love it so much. And it's like never ending stuff to explore. It's fun.
Yeah. So it sounds like your experience so far has been pretty good. Aside from the nature piece, is there anything else that really stands out for you that has been a huge change for your life?
Not really. Just like really, we've learned a lot already we've been out here about a month. We've learned a lot about like kind of tougher things like electricity We're now on solar, but that was quite the struggle initially. Stuff that you've never really had to struggle with, you know? And interestingly, like, I feel like camping and spending like tent camping and stuff like that has prepared us, because it's like, we've roughed it before, but we were on a generator for a whole month. And yeah, so like we're learning a lot about everything's more intentional. I feel like it's more intentional. We're learning how we can get power from the sun. My husband learned all this electric stuff that is like, oh my gosh, beyond me. But it's been a huge learning experience. We're learning about regenerative farming. It's pretty cool.
Amazing. So, what have you heard from other members of your community, friends or family, when you suggested tiny living might be an option for them?
On Less House More Moola, we hear so many stories of people living unconventional lives. Each of them is literally building their alt-American dream. Are you tired of putting your dreams on hold because of money? Well, let's fix it. I have a 2-part offering that is here to help you. First, I'm going to give you access to my financial freedom calculator so that you'll understand your numbers and have a tangible starting point. This is free. And then second, we'll book a session to figure out your finances so that you can live your alt-American dream as soon as possible. This is paid. Why am I giving you something for free? Because I'm passionate about empowering people to choose an unconventional path. So let's work together to figure out money so that you will know that you've officially taken action on your plans. This offering is for you if you're unsure of your cost of living or how much savings you might need. You don't know what money move to make next. You dream of an unconventional life built on your terms. You're seeking a permanent solution and not a one-time motivational boost. You want to learn about money from someone who shares your interest in breaking away from the norm. So what do you think? Are you tired of starting sentences with someday when I? Then go to altamericandream.com and get the financial freedom calculator.
Yeah. So we've had a lot of mixed things. Most people around us are so excited for what we're doing. And they're like, I love watching it, but I could never do it. A lot of it is limiting beliefs. Because I feel like we're so like conditioned to think inside this box of society and like how we should live and what we should have and consumerism and all the stuff we should have. And then we have the attachment to this stuff, and it's a whole cycle. And first of all, like, I don't think tiny living is for everybody, but to like completely close off the whole idea because it's different or scary, or the lack of space, I feel like is doing people a disservice when there's so many other options out there. And like the people who own the farm, they're building a yurt, and it's a huge yurt. It's the biggest yurt I've ever seen. But like the point is, there's so many different living situations that can solve so many of people's issues, whether it's finance issues or quality of life. And I think just being able to think outside the box and basically question everything. Like when it comes to consumerism, we're not buying as much stuff because we're in a small space. We're way more intentional when it comes to things like that.
Yeah, I just published an article on LinkedIn on Monday about limiting beliefs. And you and I have that similar experience that everybody's so fascinated, but they say, oh, I can never do that. Right. And I just wonder, like, what do you get the sense that they cannot live like that or they cannot do that? What do you think the root cause of that is?
I think it's just fear of being different. Some people even, it's like fear of what other people might think. And not to say like we all haven't dealt with that, but it's kind of separating yourself and just being like, well, what works for me and my family rather than the comparison game, I feel like. But fear, and then social conditioning is just, we're conditioned from a young age to be a certain way and do a certain thing. And I think being able to kind of explore what's true to you And whether it's different or not is what can be stopping people, is when they're able to actually like tap into that and see what really works for them.
Yeah. And certainly you experienced some fear, right? You mentioned the tornado alley thing and also, learning about solar setup. How do you all overcome your fear when it comes to these things that are sort of outside of the norm for you?
So I'm a holistic health coach, and what I do with clients is what I'm kind of doing with myself right now. So it all comes back to your why. And why. So like for us, like when we had a storm knock down our solar last week, and it was just, we felt kind of defeated. And then my husband and I had a conversation. We're like, okay, why are we doing this? What are our values? Like back to that. And that's what really just keeps you feeling good and empowered, and like you're making the right decision, is just remembering why you want to do something. So like for us, it was like the values, spending time outside, these kids, the house, like even though it's tiny, it is so much nicer than the past two houses we've had here. And like we both agreed we'd rather live in a small house that we love than a big house that is just not great for us.
And so, I talk a lot about values. In fact, it's something that I've mentioned a lot on the podcast and I do in my financial planning practice, is helping people kind of come to their values and understand what their values are, because I do agree that that is such an important guidepost or roadmap for every decision that we make in life. If we can make them in alignment with values, then, when we get to the other side of that decision, we will feel good about the decision that we made. Whereas if we just sort of follow the expectations, we may get to the other side of following the expectations and, 30 years of doing what you think you were supposed to do. And you may go, what the heck have I been doing all these years? I don't feel like I'm truly myself. So how did you and your husband, like, how did you even figure out values were a thing? And like, where did that come into your ecosystem?
I think like we both had been on like kind of a self-development spiritual journey the past couple of years. And I think that really helped because we were able to tap into us and like what was true to us. And then obviously kids help because you question everything and you're like, what kind of life do I want them to live? That was a big, big part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because unless you go on that self-development quest in life, you may just never even know what your values are. And in an earlier episode, my husband and I, Eric, and I had a conversation about our first conversation when we figured out, what our values were and how we've used that to make decisions about our future. And it's been so impactful. And every time we, are making a decision, we can go back to those touch points, those values, and figure out, comfortably, like, how do we move forward here? Well, this, does or doesn't align with, values, mine being independence and exploration. And so, like, I know if I'm moving in that direction, I'm probably going to feel really good. And so it's been such a helpful framework, but there are so many people that have never even thought about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also it's like, we're spending more time just like quiet time thinking. Like we don't meditate hours a day or anything like that, even though that would be wonderful, but it's not in the cards right now. But we're not filling our brain with TV hours a day, and we're reading books instead that again are more aligned with self-development, and like being able to kind of focus more on us and what really like whether it's the past or working through different things. But I love how you tie that into financial planning, because that's a huge thing too. It's like, it's more empowering. And when you're in alignment with what matters with you, it's not as scary because you're like, I know this is my path and I know this is what feels right to me.
Yeah, that's so good. So if you don't mind sharing, tell us exactly, you're very young, you've got a young family. How did you afford to do this? Because a lot of people can't figure out how to afford to go tiny.
Yeah. So we're young, but we're financially responsible. We're both like, we both came from not a lot of money. And my husband was the spender in the relationship for sure until we got together. And pretty much like, so he's military. Every time he's re-enlisted, he gets a chunk of money. We've sold 2 houses and gotten a chunk of money. So little bits at a time. I'm trying to think of what else, like tax money, like little things, like any little bits at a time that we get, we always put in savings.
Mm-hmm.
So the chunks of money. So we don't save money every single month. Well, sometimes we do, but we hadn't been in years.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to pay cash for our house, which is $95,000, which is a huge chunk that most 29-year-olds would not have. But because of that planning, so we basically were kind of squirreling away all our money in investments. So we made money on investments also, even though we pulled out when it was down, which kind of hurt us. But the interest rate on tiny houses was so bad. We're like, you know what? This was meant to be. Now we have no payment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how does that feel for you at 29 years old to own your house and be debt free?
It's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome because even like it was very scary at first because we're used to having this huge chunk, but we had this huge chunk as like a giant emergency fund that we didn't need, and we never touched it. And so we still have a couple months that we're going to be obviously getting way more once we start saving money living here with such low expenses. But we still have a little emergency fund, and money was just sitting there not doing anything. We kept it with the plan of using it to buy land. But again, it was like, why hold off everything for several years down the line when the kids are young now and we know what we want now? And this is a learning experience now.
Mm-hmm.
So we said, let's just do it. But it feels really good because we don't have like our monthly expenses are so low now out here, which is pretty cool because we have solar. So we're off-grid solar. So our backup is a generator and not on-grid power. So we have no electric bill. And we do have a hose hookup from them. So we have like a little bit of a water bill. Our internet, we have like, there's no house payment. It's a huge chunk that's back in our pocket. So for the next 2 years, we'll be able to save a lot of money. So it's really, really cool.
And so that gives you just so much more free cash flow that now you can start thinking about in 2 years what land you want to buy, or, maybe the jumpstart to help, bridge that gap between your husband's military and the next job or what have you. So you have 2 years to build up that cushion.
Exactly, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I think there's some limiting beliefs around packing in 4 people in a tiny home and raising a family in a tiny home. So share with us what you think some of the limiting beliefs are around that, and then how you would sort of, challenge some of those limiting beliefs.
So it's funny. Like I used to love watching HGTV, and I feel like every like remodel show or anything like that, house hunting, all the kids needed their own room, their own bathroom, and like so much space. And it's crazy because then I talked to my grandma or anyone else about different generations and how we lived. And like nobody had a house bigger than 3 bedrooms back then. All the kids shared rooms, they shared bathrooms, they were closer together. And I feel like the biggest thing is people think that like little kid, like my kids are small. It might be different if I had teenagers, but they think that little kids need their own space. And truly they need connection with us more than anything. And so we also granted, we do have a big, it's the biggest tiny house I'd ever seen. Like it is 36 feet long and there's a downstairs bedroom. So we have more space. So the kids share the bedroom downstairs. And so but in the old house, like we all shared bed. We all shared the king size bed in our room anyways. The kids didn't. So now that they're in their own room, we're close. So they don't get scared because we're right here. They can hear us across the house and be like, hey, I'm right here. They get scared at night. But they truly just want to be with us anyways. So and even 10-year-olds, like they really need that connection. Great. And they do have, every now and then my 4-year-old needs some space from the toddler. And I'll be like, okay, you can go up in my loft, and he'll hang out in our bed in the loft up here because there's a baby gate, so he can't get up there. and he does still have his own space. Or we go outside where there's so much space everywhere. But I feel like space is a huge thing. And then stuff is like kids do come along with a lot of stuff, but they don't have to come with as much stuff as like most people have, you know? Like toys aren't as necessary. Yes, we have toys, but you don't need a million toys when you have a whole yard and a whole field and whatever else to go explore. Like that's when the imagination gets going. They don't need all these gadgets. Like it's really cool. Kids got along for so many years without so many different toys and technology. And I feel like it was so much better for the imagination, especially in young children. So that's again back to our values and why we're out here.
Yeah, sure. So I can hear my listeners' inner thoughts right now. And what they're thinking is you all are approaching winter. So the outdoor space is going to be a little bit different. So how are you all thinking about your approaching winter and need to be inside more?
So I don't think we need to be inside more. There is this book called There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather. And it's amazing. It's all like from a Scandinavian perspective. And a friend of mine's from Germany, and she's like the exact same mindset. It's different countries have horrible weather compared to us. It's always cold and wet and miserable. And their saying is there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. And so we harness that here. Summers here are awful. That's when we end up being inside a lot. So I guess it's good we moved in August here. So we only had like a month of that. And we would just be outside, come inside and cool off, go outside, come inside and cool off. Because it's like it was 110 degrees for weeks. Like it's very, very hot here. So because of that, we're able to appreciate the cold winters. Like we spent all winter last year outside. And we plan to do the same this year. We'll need different gear, I think, being on a farm. But yeah, I think there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing is like so empowering because it's really true like 90% of the time.
I am going to write that down somewhere and carry it with me because I think there's just so much focus on that ideal weather condition.
Which is only like 2 months out of the year anyways, most places,
Right. And, as listeners, I think know, I am still in transition to my, tiny house. We're about 8 months away from our full-time tiny living. And so currently I'm still in Florida, and there are so many people here moving for ideal weather conditions that they feel are going to be ideal weather conditions. But the reality is that they're going to spend a lot of time indoors because it is so hot. And like you said, and where you are, that it's so hot. And yet, even when it's so hot, because I have, some space here where I live, I spend a lot of time outdoors, even when it's so hot. And of course, you can't, take off but so many clothes, and it doesn't really matter in a hot and humid environment. But I think, humans have existed in a variety of different, climate conditions. And yet we have become so normalized to having everything the perfect temperature all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I love that there's no bad weather, just bad clothing.
Yeah. It's like a whole Scandinavian thing with like so many different countries in Europe have that mindset and are outside all the time. The kids have nature schools outside and they're outside like cold. And also like we don't like it gets cold here, but it's not brutally cold. So we're technically in Oklahoma now. We're in like southern Oklahoma. So it gets cold, but it's not a cold winter. We might get snow once.
Yeah. So you mentioned kind of your self development spiritual journey that you're on, and kind of the way that you take in that self development thematic in your life. What else is there from a source? How do you think outside the box? Why do you think outside the box? Why do you kind of follow your own path? Do you think there was something in your childhood that inspired that? Where did that come from for you?
Oh, my parents have always been like open-minded and supportive of a lot of things. So I think that helped a lot. And I still was like a people pleaser for a few years. But once I got out of that and was not afraid to be different, it was just freeing. So I guess I've always been an independent thinker. My husband's always like, he was a little afraid, I feel like, for a little bit, about being different and unique. And now he just does not care. And I love it so much. It's like the way that, like, with your husband, I'm sure it's like the way that you can like change, like not purposely, but you change each other. Like you bounce off each other and you evolve together. And it's really cool. But I think the fact that we just don't really care, like we go to our own beat. We don't really, it doesn't matter what other people think because they're not in our life, They don't know what works for us.
Good. Yep. You got to have that independent thought and value your own voice. And I think that for, a long time, in our earlier years, we are taught to value other people's voices. And especially now that we can Google absolutely anything, we're always looking to someone else to tell us the answer. And so learning to value and appreciate your own voice, I think, comes with some life experience where you listen to your own voice and you hear or experience how that turns out for you. And then it strengthens your ability to hear your own voice and follow your own path. For me, I listened to my own inner voice back in 2020 and went completely alcohol free. And this has been the most dramatic and significant change of my life. And having done that thing makes me feel so much more of a believer of my own voice. And building our tiny house too helped us really experience that, you would tackle something and, one day at a time, and you can accomplish pretty much anything you kind of set out to do. Another, time to see, hey, following my own voice really turned out well for me. And I didn't even know at the time what the long-term game plan for the tiny house would be. But it has been just a moment where we followed our own voice, and it is significantly changing our lives in a really amazing way. So I love that there's, people out there that are learning to listen to their own voice younger in life. I wish I had started listening a lot younger.
Yeah. Yep.
Good.
We're alcohol free too. And that was also like right around 2020. I lost, like my family's Italian. So it's all like a lot of drinking, and we lost my uncle due to alcoholism. And I was like, I don't feel good when I drink anyways. It's just not worth it. And so we stopped. But it's like when you do listen to your own voice, like you said, it's like everything really just kind of flows. Like once you get in that flow state, it's so easy to remember and to keep going with it.
Yeah, so good. So how would you rate the complexity of having a family in a tiny house versus what you experienced in a normal house or base housing?
It's about the same, mainly because like my kids are young, and we like I said, we co-slept in the same bed for years in the last house. So it's not that different. Honestly, the biggest issue has been the dog. We have a German Shepherd, and she sheds so much. And now that we're on a farm, she brings in so much dirt, and it's like all of that shedding in one tiny little space. Like that's been the hardest part, not the kids, because the kids, like, they want to be with us anyways. They're next to us most of the time. So that's been easy. If anything, it's been easier. It's easier to keep an eye on them, and small space is easy to childproof for the wild climbing 18-month-old that I have. So it's been pretty easy. And then, like I said, like the farm, like it's easy to, like now our kitchen window overlooks, we made this tiny little yard, kind of like working on the outside space right now because we've only been here a month, but we made a small little yard area, and we have like a mud kitchen and a water table and stuff over there. So the kids will play there, and I can do dishes or something in the kitchen. I can see them like out all of our beautiful windows. It's so much easier because of the layout.
Yeah. Yeah, I too find that the complexity is the dogs. In fact, I've spent a lot of time calculating how I'm going to like accommodate my normal dog snuggles. And yeah, the dog thing is interesting. Yeah. So what do you think about how the tiny house contributes to, or hinders the health coaching work that you do? Do you feel like it's a good alignment and it sort of facilitates it, or is it more difficult because of working in the tiny house?
Well, working in the tiny house is very hard because of space right now. But we did, like, now that it's quiet outside, we have the generators. I do plan on taking a lot of calls outside when I can. But it is absolutely more in alignment because it's easier to live a holistic lifestyle out here. Like, I can be non-toxic, but I was in a toxic house, like we had some issues with mold and stuff like that and base housing. And it's like, as much as we tried, it was still not a healthy living situation. So it's a lot easier to keep a healthy living situation out here, not to mention the biodiversity out here with so many microorganisms and so much stuff, and the good soil because it's a regenerative farm. Like, it's a lot easier, I feel like, to live true to that. And cooking from scratch, like, it's interesting. I would not have expected how much easier it was. Not really easier, but how much more motivated I am to cook stuff from scratch out here. We're about 30 minutes from the closest grocery store, maybe 35 minutes. So we're pretty out there in the middle of nowhere. So there's no quick trips to the store. So I'm kind of being more pushed to cook from scratch and prepare our snacks the day before and whatever, like, just be ready. And it's a lot easier.
All right. So I think all of your thoughts around the limiting beliefs are so important, especially around the family piece. Thank you for sharing all of that. So, Amanda, please share with us, if you care to, where listeners could follow you.
So I have an Instagram, and I just got a TikTok. I'm not as much on there, but my Instagram stories are everything about our tiny life, whether it's the bad and the struggles and the kids and whatever. Both of those are at Your True Peace, YOUR, Your True Peace, all one word. And then I have a Facebook group also, more for health coaching, where I share a lot of like healthy recipes and health tips and stuff like that. Less tiny living, targeted, more holistic wellness. And that is Your True Peace, 3 words. So join my Facebook group for recipes and stuff like that. And then, like I said, Instagram, I'm very active on for stories and lots of tiny living stuff. Trying to make more reels, but we'll get there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your tiny story. I really appreciate it. And we'll definitely follow you because there's a lot more to come in your tiny journey, I'm sure.
Yes, there is. Yes, thank you.
Well, thanks for being here, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, thank you for taking the time to listen to Less House More Moola. I have another free resource on my website for you, the Unconventional Values Quiz. In just 2 minutes, you can pinpoint your style of freedom seeker, security guardian, adventure enthusiast, or community builder. Check it out at thetinyhouseadvisor.com. And one more thing. Podcasts don't have algorithms like social media does. They only grow by word of mouth and reviews. If this podcast is helpful to you, would you please post a review on your podcast app and tell a friend who is trying to live a values-based life? It would totally make my day.
Please see the show notes for important disclosure regarding the Tiny House Advisor LLC and this episode.